beginning in August now. Our theme is community. And my topic today is compassion, the next frontier. Compassion, the next frontier. You know, when we think about a frontier, we think about brave new territory that needs to be explored. It speaks of places that are still calling us to go deeper, territory in which we need to travel, greater depths and understanding, more that it is that we need to learn. Compassion, the next frontier. This COVID-19 virus that's been sweeping around the world and with which the United States has been struggling so much with, trying to find an appropriate response to it. We've been in this now for months. And at the rate that we're going, we're gonna be in it for months. And the way that our response has been, it has created this situation where we have been in an extended shutdown mode for a long time, which is collapsing the economy and doing all kinds of things. But the other thing that it's doing is that it's bringing human beings closer together in its own odd sort of way. Whereas a lot of people aren't going to work in the traditional sense, or they're working at home if they still have employment at all. Our children have been out of school for months on end now. It's August. Some of them have been out of school since February or March. Looks like September's coming around and they may not be going to school in the physical sense or only partially. You've had parents trying to homeschool their children with different varying levels of success in regards to that. But it's created this situation, even with those that are still having to go out and work and who are essential, quote unquote, workers, of making us look at our priorities. There's something about crises that makes you look at your priorities. When the tsunami comes in, the storm comes in, the fire comes in and takes the house and takes the car or whatever these things are, and you're looking around to see, is my family safe? Are we still here? Are we still intact? And there's something about the sheer value of human life that we start to prioritize more in the middle of so-called crises. Just breathe that in for a moment. So just as this COVID-19 has been sweeping through in terms of illness and mounting death, it's also put us in a position of learning to care for one another a little deeper. I saw something in social media that tickled me. It was like 2 months ago already. It was this guy, and he was doing a video and talking about the things that were going on in his house. And he wanted to offer an apology to school teachers in general, from whom he had been taking way too much for granted, and his kids, his own son's teacher in particular. And what he said was that basically how he had gotten all arrogant with his son's teacher and saying, you don't know my son, when the teacher was trying to give him some advice, and he looked in the camera and he said, I don't know my son. I don't know my son. And and I tell you, it's like for better or for worse, a lot of us have gotten to know each other like a little bit better, spending more time with each other, more phone calls, more concerns, and not just the virus. I've noticed even in the whole movement and deeper feeling about Black Lives Matters, just how much discussion is taking place now about who we are as a people, who we are as a society. How do we want to be? What's next? There's something about crises and troubles that bring up all the little gremlins when we're looking at the election cycle and how things are tensing up. I tell you what I know. What needs to be healed is revealed. What needs to be healed is revealed. See, you can't heal what you don't feel. You can't heal what you don't feel. Now, I didn't know what it was going to take. I didn't know what it was going to take to get us off the maddening consumerism spiral that we were on. I didn't know what it was going to take to make us wake up and to realize that what's happening to one of us is happening to all of us, that even the quote unquote least of us matter. I didn't know what it was going to take to make us wake up and to realize that, whoo, there's something going on here. And if we don't step up in a greater, more concerted way and really take a stand for this thing called democracy, that we just might lose it. Realizing that each and every person has a role to play. I didn't know what it was going to take. Now, I wouldn't have suspected the coronavirus. I wouldn't have suspected all of these other things. But what I do know for certain, it is no accident and there's no mistake here. Because I know how the universe works. I know how life works. Those of us who have been praying for healing, those of us who have been praying for transformation, those of us who have been praying, this is it. This is it. This is what it looks like. Now, we might not have chosen this specific way, but the moment is now. The moment is now. So I'm standing here in what looks like an empty edifice. I'm standing here now in what looks like an empty, quote unquote, church. But what this moment reminds us of is what's really, really important and what's foundational. The Greek word that's used in scripture for church is ecclesia, from which we get the word ecclesiastical. And most of the time when we hear a word like that, we think of some big, big religious institution. And we forget that the word ecclesia literally means the people. That's what it means. Ecclesia means the spiritual community. That's all that it means. And you don't have to be in a particular location to be community. Let that sink in for a moment. Community is not defined by geography. Community is not defined by your neighborhood. Community is not defined by your socioeconomic profile. Community is not defined by your habits. You can build community around those things, but community itself is transcendent of those things. Community ultimately is rooted in this recognition of our oneness at some deep level. Let that sink in for a moment. Our oneness at some deep level. Love. The Greek word love, agapeo love, is a force. It is the unifying factor of the universe. We don't live in a biverse, a triverse, a diverse, a multiverse. We live in a universe. And there is an energetic field that holds it all together. There's an energetic creative field and force out of which everything comes. So there's not a different life for the redwood or the weed. There's not a different life for the chihuahua or the elephant. There's not a different life in you or me or the planet. It's one life. One life that is expressing itself in all of these variety of things. So that's me expressing itself as a flower. That's me in the ocean. That's me and you. That's you and me. There's really only one of us here. When we forget that, we start to separate. And the only thing that ever needs to be healed is just the sense of separation. When we forget this divine interconnectedness, then we start to feel isolated. We start to feel alone. And human beings are not meant to be alone. Human beings are communal in nature. You can look at any species, they are communal in nature. We need each other. I get these spirit downloads in the form of these messages. And, and I remember the message that said to me, you think that people are in the way of your path. It said, people are your path. Breathe that in for a moment. People are your path. You can't talk about how much you love life or how much you love God and hate people. It reminds me of this song that I wrote years ago when I still lived in Los Angeles. Actually, it was a spoken word piece that was being turned into a song. And it starts off with, well, I love humanity. It's people I don't like. And that's what we do. It's like, I love humanity, but I don't like people. I love God and the universe, but I don't like people. That spirit voice reminds me all the time. It says, if you love me, you got to love what I'm about. It says, and I'm about you. You can't love a creator and not love all of its creations. Compassion, this new frontier. What compassion does is it takes this agapeo love and it gives it form. Here's what happens with the spiritual qualities. They're everywhere present. They're in the big unifying field. It's undifferentiated. It's everywhere available. It's present at all times. Joy is everywhere all at the same time. Love is everywhere all at the same time. Peace, harmony. Music is everywhere. There's no spot in the world that has more music than another spot. It's always a question in these spiritual qualities of how much do you identify with it to let it come through you? How much do you identify with it? How much do you say yes to that quality to allow it to come through you? That's all that it ever is. It's not that there's more of this or more of that over there. It's just some places have more expressions. Some places have more yes. See, nature doesn't say no. So nature is always being the fullness of life wherever it is. Nature doesn't contract. Animals don't contract. Plants don't contract. They don't stop being who and what they are because of what everybody else or anything else is doing in the universe. The birds keep flying. The ants keep crawling around. Everything keeps being what it is. It's only us as human beings that have this notion that we're going to switch it up and change depending upon what's going on. We don't give ourselves full permission to be the fullness of who we are, where we are, no matter what it is that's going on. So you have this amorphous music that's everywhere, and then you channel it through a song. Then you get to experience the music. When you hear it, it's rhythm. And you hear it as the vibratory patterns that it is. The music's still there. But when you express it, you get to feel it. So compassion is to agapeo love what the song is to music. That when we get into compassion, we take this agapeo love, this energy force field that's everywhere, this unifying factor that we so connect with, that it makes us feel that we're connected to everything. When we take that and we put it into form, when we take this awareness of the interconnectedness and the interdependence of all things, and we allow it to express itself through us, it expresses as what we call compassion. Compassion is agapeo love in action. It's an action that once we know it and once we get it, it compels us to do something. It compels us to act like we know what we know. It compels us to act like we understand this sacred interconnectedness. I got a spirit letter a couple of days ago. I haven't given it to them yet because I'm still proofing it and going through it, but it was a spirit letter that had come through for a group that's been using one of my books, The Sacred Yes, with Iyanla Vanzant. She's had a spiritual warriors class. I think there's something like 800 people who've been using this particular book through the summertime. And I've had a chance to connect and to work with them and send them books and all of the rest of that. And there was this choice point in this message. It was saying that I know that a lot of you who've been taking this course were raised in traditions that were overly concerned with this thing called sin. And it went on to explain that from a scriptural standpoint, sin literally, linguistically means to miss the mark. To miss the mark. We have grown to think of as sin as behavior, as these bad things that have been done. But this concept of sin isn't about what has happened, it's about what has not happened. Listen, you missed the mark. It's not you shot over here. You missed the mark. And what is this mark that you missed in this action? The mark that you missed was the connection. The mark that you missed was the agapeo love. The mark that you missed was the lack of awareness of the interconnectedness and the sanctity of you and everybody else that is involved in this. That's what was missed. Breathe that in for a moment. So when we think of all of the bad and the dastardly things that have happened on the planet or that may be happening now, they are not a measurement of how bad people are. It is a measurement of how much they have missed the mark on who they really are. It's not a measurement of badness. It is a measure of ignorance. So what do we do from there? What do we do from there? Here you have people who have been living in a state of spiritual amnesia. It described it as kind of a spiritual Alzheimer's, where you're living in this different reality of not understanding your connection with everybody and everything. That's where we need compassion. We need compassion because these are individuals that need to be redeemed. These are individuals that need to be brought back into the fold. This is area that needs correction. This is area that needs restoration. If we turn our backs on it, if we just condemn it, if we just separate ourselves as punishment for all these people that we think have been bad, judgment just begets more judgment. More separation doesn't bring us to more wholeness. So if you've forgotten who you are and you're doing things that are not becoming of a spiritual being, and then I forget you're a spiritual being as I'm looking at things that you did when you forgot that you were a spiritual being, then I'm colluding with you. I'm colluding with your ignorance. And the only way that I can begin to think that you're not a spiritual being is that I have to forget I'm one. Because when I remember that I'm a spiritual being, it is impossible for me not to remember that you are. So a lack of compassion starts a chain wave. Feel that, a rippling effect then of people living in darkness, of people living in a sense of a lack of truth and reality. Compassion. See, most of the time when we're thinking of compassion, we're thinking about compassion for the quote unquote the downtrodden. We're thinking about compassion for the needy or the ones that we believe have gotten the raw end of the stick on thing for whatever reason. And yes, this is important, but for most people, it's easier to find the place within their heart to have compassion for the ones they perceive as being quote unquote innocent, or the ones they think have been disempowered or marginalized. They can come up with the compassion for that. And this is a good thing. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that it's half the story. That it's half the story. Can you have compassion for everybody? In this same letter, it was quoting that song that what the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. It said, yes, it's true that every person needs love. that every person needs to be loved by someone. But there's something deeper here, the letter said. There's something deeper than just what the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, like some can get love and other people not have love, and each person needs to get a little love. Said, that's true. Said, but the bigger issue here, can you love not just some, but everyone? That what the world needs now is love, this agapeo love, for you to have this love, not just for some, but for everyone. This is the new frontier. This is the place that this moment is calling us for. Because if you don't have it, you can't do the work. If you don't have this kind of compassion, you can't do the healing, transformational work that's in front of you. What this kind of compassion calls for is forgiveness, which doesn't right the wrongs, it doesn't change what's happened, but it shifts your relationship to it, so that you no longer are feeling below it or beneath it, or that it is more than you are, but the forgiveness allows you to stand there and go, I am more than this. I am more than this. Some of the civil rights icons of the civil rights movements of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s have been passing away this year. A couple of them were in Congress, Elijah Cummings, a couple of months ago, and more recently, John Lewis, whose funeral was recent. And as fate would have it, another icon, the Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was basically the field general for Martin Luther King Jr., passed away on the exact same day as Representative John Lewis on July the 17th. And I invoke their name and their presence here as living examples of what I'm talking about. In this kind of compassion that is the new frontier, you have respect. And you have respect for everyone. I remember reading the words of Nelson Mandela. And he was saying that he learned respect and compassion in prison the last time go round when he had been sentenced for life. He said he was too busy being angry and doing his activism for any of that. But when he got sentenced to life at 47 years old, and he and his colleagues were exiled off to Robben's Island in South Africa. And he said it was there. He said, and when we started to treat the guards with respect, we started getting some respect back. At John Lewis's funeral, it's really exquisite. I invite everybody to take a look at that on YouTube. One of the most moving things in that funeral to me was to have the 3 former presidents all speaking. She had George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. So we're talking about presidencies from the 90s, like on up to recently. Different political parties. And they were exquisitely brilliant. In speaking of this thing that I am speaking of now, about community and about compassion, and what this means to come together across differences and to reconcile the rights and the wrongs in such a way that it still keeps you empowered and uplifted and still wanting to be in community with one another. King used to say, I don't want to hate or kill white people. I want to live next door to them. That's what John Lewis was saying. He said, I don't want to do anything against white people. I just want to vote next to them. I just want my life to have the same value. I just want us to get along here together. That takes some compassion. When King in his I Have a Dream speech talks about that he can see the sons and the daughters of the slave owners and the slaves still walking hand in hand together, that takes some compassion. Can you do that now? Is that your vision? Is your vision for the descendants of the Nazis and all of the people that the Nazis put in concentration camps to walk hand in hand? Do you want your progressive kids walking hand in hand with the alt-right kids? What's your vision? You may not be able to do it, but it's a vision at least of your children being able to do it. Because if we don't, if we're wanting to hold on to the hurts, and I'm not saying forget them, but I'm saying don't get so stuck in them that it disempowers us and we forget who we are spiritually. Rise above. Rise above. This moment is causing us to rise above. And you know what? George W. Bush did it again. A few weeks ago, on this very pulpit, I read his entire open letter to America that he wrote on June 2nd, 2020. Read the letter online. And once again, at John Lewis's funeral, he was brilliant. The depth of his moral compass blew me away. Why do I say that? I wasn't a fan of George W. Bush. I'm telling you, I wasn't. And there's a moment of reckoning here where we're all coming together and aligning with what matters. See, it takes compassion to rise above and see the truth wherever it is. It takes compassion to move beyond the lines that you draw in the sand where you're othering people. It takes compassion to really live like there's only one of us here. So I don't care. I don't care if we're talking about the government, the White House, or your house. Don't write people off. Don't get stuck in a who did what to whom and who you're never going to forgive and how you're going to separate and distance yourself. Don't make your so-called boundaries borders. Because all the people that you were keeping out, you're keeping your love in. We need more than that right now. And this is a defining moment. When we saw all of the people around the world who were marching for Black Lives Matters, I guarantee you they were all over the political spectrums. But they could agree on something. And it is these places of agreement that lift us up and keep the commune in community. Let's breathe that in for a moment. You're ready? I know you're ready. I know you can do more than just love the people that you like. I know you can. And if we want to have the world that we say that we want to have, there's no other way. If we want it to work for everyone, that means it has to work for everyone. If we say we want to leave no one behind, that means no one behind. And it's love that redeems. Breathe that in. So one of the good things about this new world that we're in, where everything's happening online, is that we get to do some things that we might not otherwise have been able to do. So instead of me doing my prayer as the closing, I'm going to give the closing to Representative John Lewis. On his deathbed, he wrote something. And he wrote something that was meant to be distributed the day of his funeral. So a couple of days ago, it was published by the New York Times, and it was put to a video read by his good friend Morgan Freeman. It's a little about 6 minutes. I invite you to listen to the whole thing, and you can go on YouTube, get clips of it. This is something that you want to share. This is truly a prayer.
John Lewis's last words appeared in the New York Times today in an essay that he wrote shortly before his death, intending it to be published on the day of his funeral. Here is that essay, read for us today by John Lewis's friend and admirer, Morgan Freeman.
While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. Though I was admitted to the hospital the following day, I just had to see and feel it for myself, that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never, ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason, were the bars. Though I was surrounded by 2 loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, shoot unwitting concert goers in Las Vegas, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide.
John Lewis gets tonight's last word through the voice of his friend, Morgan Freeman.
And so it is, and so it is, and so it is, and so it is, and so it shall be, and so it shall be, and so it shall be for you and me.